hope you can all see my screen, and I hope you're having a wonderful morning. Thank you all for joining us and sending a warm welcome to everyone here with us today. Thanks again for joining us. My name is Amy Della and I work for QCOS, the Queensland Council of Social Service. I'm the Senior Data Analyst in the Research and Policy team at QCOS, and I provide data capability support internally to QCOS as well as externally to our members. I'm the project lead, coordinator and facilitator of the DFSV Data Insights Initiative and the DFSV Data Insights Network. So the purpose of today is to start thinking about some of the people, processes and systems that can support data maturity and data capability within organisations. And this thinking can support some of the key components that are needed in a data strategy. For the agenda, I'm going to give a very quick recap of the purpose of the DFSV Data Insights Network. I'll revisit the plan for the network and talk about some of the resources that are now available to the DFSV services sector through this initiative. I'd then like to hand it over to our guest speaker for today's event, Professor Kerrie Mengersen, who will walk us through what is the data strategy. Today's session is only for 1 hour, and given that we've started a little bit late today, we might not have much time for some Q&A. We will try and allow some time for that if we can get through all of the content. But if we do run out of time, please, we can connect with you individually after the session. Just pop your question into the chat pane. A couple of housekeeping things to note. By default, you will be on mute, but your camera will be turned on. This session will be recorded, so if you don't want your face shown in the recording, please feel free to turn your camera off. The Q&A component of the webinar will not be recorded. If during Q&A you'd like to ask a question, you can write the question in the chat. The other option is you can put your hand up using the raise your hand emoji and then take yourself off mute to ask the question. So I'm joining you from Meanjin in Brisbane on the banks of the Maiwar River in Brisbane, and I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the Yagara and Turrbal people and all First Nations colleagues and friends joining us online today. As way of introduction, we'd love you all to share, if you feel comfortable in doing so, in the chat who you are and where you're joining us from today as well, and where you work, and we'd really encourage you to acknowledge country where you are today in the chat too. I've already introduced myself. I also have some QCOS colleagues online today. Tariro, who's the Manager for Research and Evaluation at QCOS, and Nadia, who's the Data and Reports Officer. I'd also like to give a special warm welcome to our guest speaker for today, Professor Kerrie Mengersen. So QCOS is the Queensland's peak body for the social service sector, and our vision is to achieve equality, opportunity and wellbeing for all Queenslanders. QCOS is also the state's interim DFV peak body for the DFV sector. And so over the next 2 to 3 years, QCOS will establish an independent DFV peak body, a member-based organisation representing domestic and family violence services in Queensland. And for inquiries related to the DFV peak body, please contact dfvpeak@qcos.org.au. The DFSV Data Insights Initiative and the DFSV Data Insights Network is funded separately to the DFV peak. So Queensland Government has funded QCOS to deliver activities that aim to build and strengthen the data capability for DFSV services staff and DFSV organisations, and internally within the departments, women's safety and victims and community support. And this initiative also extends to sexual violence services as well. So I'll just share the peak contact details in the chat for you now, just in case you have inquiries related to the peak body. Before we start, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the terrible impact of domestic, family and sexual violence on individuals, families and communities, and the strength and resilience of the children and adults who have and are still experiencing violence. We pay respects to those who did not survive and to their family members and friends. QCOS would like to acknowledge and celebrate the work, strength and courage of the domestic, family and sexual violence sector, the outcomes that have been achieved, and to all those who are part of this journey now. As a network, these discussions focus on domestic, family and sexual violence. So if you do find anything distressing from today's content, we'd encourage you to please take the steps you need to exercise your right to safety and ensure your own well-being first and foremost. The presentation components of the session will be recorded, so if you do need to step away, you're more than welcome to come back to watch the session at a later time. If you do find yourself in need of support, please reach out to your EAP, your supervisor or support service, such as the ones we've listed here in the slides. Just really, firstly, a quick recap on the background of the DFSV Data Insights Initiative and the DFSV Data Insights Network. So the DFSV Data Insights Network provides an opportunity for collaboration and knowledge sharing in the area of DFSV data, with the aim of more effectively utilising community sector resources and government developed resources to promote improved outcomes and data capability across the DFSV services sector. In terms of the purpose of the network, it's to improve the data maturity of the DFSV service sector, to ensure there is an understanding of and commitment to the benefits of adopting an insights-driven approach, to also ensure sector uptake of resources and provide support across the DFSV service sector to enable service responses that are underpinned by integration, robust information and evidence-based practice, and also to enable the DFSV service sector to be positioned to enact people, process and system changes as required through business readiness and data strategy support. In terms of the guiding values of the network, these are collaboration, transparency, a safe place to ask difficult questions, confidentiality, peer support and innovation. So just a quick recap on the journey so far. QCOS have coordinated and facilitated 2 networks so far. So the first webinar for the launch was the launch of the network, and the focus for the webinar was on the value of data and how it can improve practice. And guest speaker Dr. Ruth Knight outlined the benefits and opportunities of using data-informed approaches in our work and the value to DFSV services and practitioners. And then last week we facilitated the webinar for the network, and the topic for the webinar was on what are we learning about DFSV through data. And for that session, we highlighted the voices, perspectives and insights of research, evidence and the use of data in the field of DFSV. So for those of you who may have missed our first couple of webinars, I'll share the links to the recordings in the chat for you now. I'll also share a link to the terms of reference, which is now available on the DFSV Data Insights website, which I'll touch on briefly in a moment. So in terms of the plan for the network going forward, this slide maps out the next webinar topic ideas, and this includes the 3 webinars that I just covered. So today is the last webinar for the year, so we'll share more details about upcoming webinars early next year. And when we're talking about data strategy, we're also considering how it links to other resources, and we'll be revisiting some of the concepts and elements of a data strategy that we're unpacking today, and additional supports and resources provided to services. For example, when we're looking at upcoming webinar topics around data governance framework and data quality strategy, as well as data maturity and data action plans, data strategy action plans. So what I thought I'd do now is talk about some of the resources and supports that are available or will become available for the DFSV service sector, and then I'll hand it over to our guest speaker for today's event, and hopefully we'll have some time for some Q&A. So we have the DFSV Data Insights website page now, where you can find out more about the DFSV Data Insights initiative. You can express your interest to join the network, as well as links to access data supports and resources. And QCOS will update these sites with additional resources over time. In addition to the DFSV Data Insights Network, QCOS is also funded to provide additional uplift data capability support for up to 20 DFSV funded services. So please feel free to reach out to our team if you'd like to request support for your organisation. So again, I'll share the links to the website along with some of the other resources for you now in the chat pane. And so please also reach out to our team if you think your organisation would make a great case study, or if you have insights you'd like to share more broadly with the network. We'd really love to hear and connect with you. So hopefully that provides a good grounding on where we are with the network activities, and I'd really like to move on to the guest speaker component for today's webinar on data strategy for impact. So distinguished Professor Kerrie Mengersen's focus is on using and developing new statistical and computational methods that can help to solve complex problems in the real world. These problems are in the fields of environment, genetics, health and medicine, and industry. Her research expertise includes Bayesian statistics, hierarchical modelling, and complex systems. She's currently the director of the QUT Centre for Data Science and holds a concurrent role as associate member of the Department of Statistics at the University of Oxford in the UK. I met Kerrie a number of years ago when we were working on a data sharing demonstration project with QCOS members, and we're very excited to have Kerrie here with us today to speak about the topic about data strategy for impact. We're really looking forward to hearing all of your insights today, Kerrie, on some of the key components of what to include and consider when developing a data strategy, as well as some common pitfalls. So I will hand it over to Kerrie now and stop sharing my screen. Hopefully we can get the screen sharing right now. Thanks, Kerrie.
Okay, thanks very much, Amy, and thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to this group. Hello, everybody. As Amy said, I'm Kerrie Mengersen, and thanks for that introduction. I'm going to share my screen and hopefully talk about data strategy for impact. So now I'm presuming that you can see my screen, but I'm not sure if you can see it in presentation mode.
We can see the slides.
Okay, but not in presentation mode.
Not in presentation mode.
All right.
But it's
so
pretty
what
clear.
I'm going to do then is I'll see if you can see them as I change through. Yes, can you see the slide change?
No.
Okay. All right. Can you see the slide change if I do this? Hang on, not that. That. Can you see that slide change?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm sorry, everybody. There's some issue about presentation mode. Just bear with me just for 1 second to see if this works. No. Okay. All right. Okay. So you'll just have to listen to it like this. I'm sorry about that. But what I want to talk about is the issue that we have with data and for all organisations. So data is pervasive in all of our decisions, and what I hear a lot in the conversations with many partners and organisations is that it's not just about collecting the data, but it's actually trying to do something with it. And the kinds of things that people want to do with it is obviously to reporting, but also for insights in their own organisation, but also even something more. They want to be part of the story creation, not just its conclusion. In other words, not just collecting data and giving it to somebody else and then having those that other entity providing insights back and recommendations and policies. They want to be part of the actual creation of those of that information for their own benefit and then also for their clients' benefits. They want to gain new insights and make new decisions. They want to be more data-driven in their organisation. They want to stay in front of the wave, like what's coming and what's new in the use of data and the benefits that data can provide. They want to be thinking about intelligent data collection, not just collecting everything that's available or what they think should be available, but actually thinking about like, how do I manage that data collection and make it so that I'm collecting information that's actually useful for the organisation. And then also learning about the many, but also learning about the individual. So not just the, so it's important to learn about the group or the organisation or the set of clients or the cohort, but it's also important to be thinking about the personalisation of that. What does it mean for an individual as well? Now, what's interesting is that we see the same kind of questions happening across different entities. So if you go to a financial entity, they're talking about, we only see our customers at specific time points. How can we learn more about them so that they deliver better services? If you go to a hospital, they're talking about exactly the same thing. What do we know about the patient journey so that we can improve healthcare? So it's all about like the same kinds of conversations that are being had in different organisations around the use of data and the insights from data. So the message from this is it's really good to look over the fence at what others are doing and to see how you might benefit, or how we all might benefit from their journey in the data space. So modern business challenges that face all of us are, inability to make timely data-driven decisions, really reporting on the past and not anticipating and preparing for the future. Many organisations talk about overlooking or misusing strategies like Gen AI, which we hear, and like how do we deal with this? Adoption of technology. Uncertainty about making decisions about purchasing IT and software, and also being locked into a single vendor for various parts of the data lifecycle. So if any of this resonates with you and you'd like to put some comments in the chat for any of the points I'm making, please do, and share your thoughts with others. If there's some points here that really resonate with you, then share that. There's another set of business strategies, business challenges as well. These are from a website, analytics8.com, which actually is a very good site for looking at or to read about data and data challenges and data strategies. So inconsistent and poorly defined and undocumented definitions for metrics and KPIs, data stuck in silos and departments. And so this is such a common issue. Manually integrating data from different data sources, spending too much time preparing raw data, and data quality and data access issues. And as we talked about, being a provider of the intel rather than a user or a driver of the data and decisions. So they're 12 points. And, if you think about how many of those you would check off for your organization, if it's like 1 or 2, doing fantastic. If it's more than like 6 or 7, you're normal. And if you're ticking all of them, then that's like there are very many businesses and organizations that find all of these business challenges. So a data strategy then aims to address these kinds of data challenges in an organization. So I'll just focus quickly on what actually is a data strategy. So as we all know, strategies are critical for modern organizations. So strategy is a blend of like the goals, the plans, and importantly, the adaptability of an organization and of the plan itself with future change. So when we look at the kinds of strategies in an organization that deal with data, the IT strategy, the digital strategy, and then the data strategy. And the data strategy might often be integrated with an IT strategy, it might be integrated with a digital strategy, or all three might be integrated as well. But it's also important to think not just about the IT and the digital, but about the data component of those strategies. So an IT strategy is going to focus on why and how a business will invest and use technology to achieve its goals. A digital strategy is going to talk about why and how a business will use digital technologies, activities, and processes to achieve its goals. So you might talk about in IT applications, infrastructure, end-use computing, IT management. In a digital strategy, you might talk about the kinds of digital technologies that are used. A data strategy is going to focus on the data. So why and how data are collected, stored, managed, shared, analysed, and communicated in the business. And this kind of strategy is going to include, like, why are you doing this? What's the external context for a data strategy? And then the important components that QCOS has been talking about: people, processes, and products that are involved in the data in the organisation. And the data strategy is a deliberate and objective plan. So a data strategy can also be embedded in a quality strategy as well. So you have a strategy for data, but you actually embed it in a broader strategy, which is, okay, this strategy is going to be a plan. We need to then implement that plan. We need to evaluate that plan, and we need to act on that plan. And so again, by acting and implementing that plan, we see how we can revise that plan at a future stage. So having that kind of context about this strategy is not just something we're going to pin on the wall and it looks pretty, but it's actually going be implemented and revised at certain key points in the future. So why do we think about a data strategy? And I'm going to think about this in terms of 3 case studies. The first one is a broad case study. This is the Australian government. So the Australian government has a data and digital strategy. And this is combined, again, between the data and digital strategy, and it's got an implementation plan for the Australian government public service. And the reason I'm putting this up is that it's worth looking at. There's a reference there, a link there. It's worth looking at like what this data and digital strategy says, how it's structured, and what it might mean for organisations outside the public service. So they talk about in this digital and data and digital strategy about the need for a strategy to address outdated technology, storage of the same data across multiple systems, silos, lack of interoperability, outdated legislation, standards and policy, reduced public trust and respect in the Australian public service, and low adoption of emerging technologies. Again, a subset of the kinds of data challenges that we saw earlier. The second case study is around the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Community Health Service. Raymond presented on this recently for QCOS. The ATSIX is a fantastic example of an organisation that is a community-owned health and human services organisation that has a number of different activities and is really involved in developing IT strategies, digital strategies, and data strategies. And we were supporting them and working with them in the data strategy. So ATSIX talks about why they need a data strategy, because they need to manage personal information about clients and generate data for the different services. They need to map to the IT strategy in terms of unlocking data-driven decision-making, and they need to get over this issue of data management systems in silos and inability to undertake purposeful data analytics. So they need to enhance internal capacity to utilise the data and break down the silos of data. The third case study is an organisation, I'm going to call it ABC here, but it's an organisation that collects data regularly from many clients, and the clients are at different levels of technological maturity. So some are still at providing the data in terms of a photograph of some numbers on a page, and others are at a very high end of API, real-time data provision. So very different maturity in clients. And as Amy said, there'll be a discussion about maturity later, and we'll touch on it just a little bit here as well. So why does this organisation want a data strategy? They want to improve the client interface, so there's easy data provision. They want safe data storage and access, effective analysis of the client data, and informative client feedback. So lots of reasons that organisations have articulated about why they want this data strategy. And it's a really good place to start about why do you want this sort of strategy. So then the elements of a data strategy, what does it entail? And so there's a number of different sort of recipes for how to set up a data strategy. And I've just listed a few of them here and would like to share them with you. Amazon Web Services talks about 2 elements of a data strategy. But if we look at these, they say, look at the, firstly, align the data management with the business strategy and the data governance. And they have 2 primary purposes: improve the data architecture decisions, and so how the company stores, collects, transforms, distributes, and consumes data, and the technical aspects of data management, how the tech works. The other one is around managing data, and so support the entire organisation for collaborative and consistent data management, and give everyone the answers to 5 key questions. So these are questions that you can also consider, you can see here as well. So again, these kinds of like, why are we doing this kind of strategy? There's also, QCOS has 3 elements of the data strategy, aligned to the vision of the organisation, looking at people, processes, and systems. You go from 2 to 3 to 7 elements of a data strategy. So Datamation has a really nice explanation of different elements of data strategy, going from the data lifecycle management, so understanding how data moves through the organization, data governance, data integration and interoperability, data quality management, the team that's going to be involved with data and the skills that they have, the data architecture, and the data analytics and business intelligence. So including in the data strategy, each of those different components. There's an Analytics 8 has a very nice description of each of 7 elements of a data strategy. Same ideas in a different kind of structure, but quite nicely set out. Alignment with the business objectives. What's the maturity of the organization and the people? What's the data architecture technology that's available now, and also you planned for the future, desired for the future? What's the data analytics team? What's the effective data governance, a data strategy roadmap, and importantly then the culture change and adoption. So this site has a lot of information about each of those steps. So if we sort of consolidate those different, 2, 3, 5, 7 different strategies, we can think about 5 elements of a data strategy: the purpose, the parameters. So how does the strategy align to internal and external drivers and policies? Where will this data strategy sit internally and externally? And who will it interface, or who will interface with it? And then the people, the processes, and the products. So I'd just like to touch on each one of those. So thinking about our case studies then, just in terms of what they actually put in their data strategy, if you're thinking about setting up a data strategy, what does it look like? What does it include? Then you can go through those different elements of a data strategy that I was talking about. But if we look at some case studies then, the APS has their strategy structured through 5 missions and also 4 enablers. And you can see the missions there and the enablers. And so these slides will be shared. This is what they talk about for each one of those points. ATSIX has the elements of strategy, as you can see here. So purpose and scope, the roadmap vision statement, what's the vision, the mission, and the alignment of the strategy, the data strategy to each one of those other strategies. And then the conceptual framework, then some recommendations about data governance, the technology platform, and the data analytics strategy, and then some challenges that are important to address and the way that they will address them. Strategies for addressing those, and then the operating context for the data strategy. So this is another way of sort of framing a data strategy, the actual, the elements of it. So if we think then about creating a data strategy, then we first start with the purpose. So why are we doing this? And I'd like you just to consider, and you might like to put in the chat, why do you need a data strategy? How will it align with your business objectives? Who supports the creation and implementation of a data strategy? What are your current data challenges? And what will the implementation of a data strategy achieve? They're the sort of 5 key questions that you might ask about the why for a data strategy. So there are some practical steps there about identifying relevant drivers, understanding the activities in the organisation, interviewing levels of the organisation, seeing what they're trying to measure and what their needs are, and comparing your findings to the industry standards. So these kinds of practical steps then are useful in how do you go about actually implementing or finding out and articulating the purpose of the data strategy. And by doing this as well, mapping the business activities, understanding people's current processes with respect to data, and the organisation's current processes with respect to data, understanding where the gaps are and where you want to get to, really helps in lots of other ways as well in understanding your organisation. So I've got in the slides here some case, the purpose and the statements around purpose for each of the case studies. I'm going to leave these for now, but I'm happy to share the slides, and then you'll be able to see these as summaries, and the full details are in the links that are there. As you see, for the purpose here for the APS, growing maturity, advancing interoperability, and strengthening oversight and advice functions. So they talk about delivering, they talk about a purpose with respect to data. So these are some of the, you can see on the screen here, some of the purposes with respect to data. ATSIX, on the other hand, talks about purpose as intended to guide ATSIX in developing and implementing policies, procedures and workflows to realise its ambitions in maximising the use of its data. So different articulations of the purpose of a data strategy. And they align the data strategy to their vision, and as you can see here, and they align to the strategy of the different visions there. The ABC organisation has a purpose to create a data technology stack that would meet the company's aims. And so what they really wanted to know in our discussions with them, what approaches are other comparable organisations taking? What are the pros and cons of different kinds of digital software options for data? And what are the comparative advantages of an Excel-based system? So they were starting at this Excel-based level and wanted to know, well, could they continue with that, or should they improve that? And I'm suspecting that there are some organisations in the audience or in your networks that would be asking these kinds of questions as well. So we come to the parameters, the environment in which this data strategy is going to sit. And the operating context here is around who will engage with the data strategy, who are the user groups that will actually engage with this strategy, who are the key stakeholders within and outside the organisation. And then looking internally, so what's the internal operating context for the data strategy? What's the data maturity level of the organisation and staff? Where are we starting from? What are the barriers, the constraints, the opportunities? How volatile is the organisation in terms of like how quickly is it growing? What are its future needs going to be? How is it changing with respect to its data? And who are the data champions in the organisation? And then looking out. So what's the external operating context? What's the role of the organisation as a data producer, as a consumer, and as a decision maker? What are the barriers, the constraints, the opportunities, the volatility? How does the organisation actually deal with data with these other organisations? And also, what organisations look like me, and what are they doing with respect to data that I would like to do? And who would be those external data champions to support a data strategy in an organisation? It's where a network like QCOS is creating here and that you're part of is really important to be able to learn from others in the network and to collectively grow in this data space. So I'll just focus on ATSIX and their sort of map, if you like, of their stakeholders. This is taken from their report, so it's a little bit difficult to read, but in the centre they talk about having individuals in the ATSIX board, and then they talk, for example, about a next circle, the more direct circle of users and stakeholders, the government services, the staff and the clients and the members, and then feeding out to a broader set of circles. So been talking about the leadership, talking about links to the other organisations and so on. So you can sort of see how they're setting up these circles of influence and engagement. And by doing that, then they set up a whole sort of ecosystem for where the data strategy and the data in ATSIX is going to sit. So one consideration also is just this data maturity map and checklist. So this is about like where an individual sits and where an organisation sits with respect to data maturity. And so you can think about, like, where are you as a different kind of person in an organisation in your role? Where are you with respect to data maturity, and where is your organisation with respect to data maturity, or your workplace? And Amy, would you like to talk to that?
Yeah, thanks, Kerrie. So I thought we'd do a fun interactive activity, and Tariro is going to try and share her screen. So I just shared a link to a Mentimeter. If you can click on the link and complete that, it's a very quick question of just completing that information that Kerrie just spoke about rating yourself in terms of your data maturity as an individual and an organisation, and we're going to try and share those results and what that looks like as a collective here on the webinar today. So are you able to share your screen, Tariro, and see if we can see if there's some results come through already? Great, wonderful. I can see there's 2, 4, 6, there's at least 6 responses, which is great. So you just kind of scroll down the screen and you can identify, from your role, and then you measure that against as an individual where you are and where is your organisation sitting and where you think that sits. And then we'll do some reflection around that too. So I'm really glad we can see the results. That's very exciting. It's the first time we've tried to do like an interactive activity like this. So we might give you just maybe 30 seconds more just to complete the activity.
Face, though, but it's just something.
Someone's just joined us. Good timing.
Tease me for Austin, and it's like a psychological thing now where I'm like, that's so bad. Yeah.
It's like my father.
Apologies, everyone. I've muted the person that's just joined us. So I think that's probably enough time. That's actually really interesting responses. Thank you, everyone, for completing that activity with us. I think it really, it probably reflects what we're kind of hearing in webinar 1 and webinar 2 from the group as a collective around individuals are rating themselves like reasonably proficient or at a fairly mature data maturity or basic level as well, and then also rating their organisations at a reasonably basic level too. So we can see one analyst rates themselves more highly than the rest of the group, but we're generally kind of sitting at that lower or intermediary data maturity level. So that really highlights, I guess, the need for the network and extra additional supports that we can share with you. So thanks everyone for doing the activity. I'll hand it back to you, Kerrie.
Okay, thank you. I'll just get back to my screen. Okay, I'm presuming you can see my screen?
Yes, excellent.
In the fashion? Okay, all right. So when we think about creating a data strategy, then we get to the 3 components of the people, the processes, and the products. And so thinking about people, who interacts with data in the organisation, who else will be impacted by the data strategy, and who is the data analytics team? And so some of this is answered by the environment, as we talked about, the parameters, but it's useful to focus on these actual who is it that is actually accessing or interacting with the data and responsible for the data. Now, ADSICS talked about in their data strategy a data ecosystem. So they had categories of actors, and then activities and the data flow, and then the roles that those, or the description about those as well. So you can see here categories of actors, the data stewards, the people or the organisations, and the contributors. There's some others as well, the regulators, the intermediaries, the beneficiaries, the researchers, and the policy makers. There's also an important aspect of the data analytics team. So this is who's going to do the actual management and analysis and reporting of the data. So question, is your team decentralized in different workplaces in the organisation? Is your data analytics team centralized, or is it a bit of both? What are the size and resources of your organisation and its current and future data needs? You can come up with a great data strategy, but if you're a small organisation with limited resources, then that's going to mean that you either roll that strategy out over a longer period or refine it in some way, or share the resources and activities with other organisations. what's the skill sets of the team? We come back now to sort of the data maturity. So what level of data literacy do they have? What sort of training do they need? And do you need more or other people? So a data analytics assessment tool might be looking at upper management, line of business subject matter expert, and the IT analyst with respect to different aspects of data analytics. So we now talk about the data processes. And so again, this is looking at like, what are the processes in the organisation that currently involve data? Are they integrated? In other words, do they talk to each other? Are they interoperable? Could they be, how could they be made more efficient? Do you need different processes, new processes, and so on? And what are your peers doing that you want to emulate or surpass? So the kinds of, it's also really important to think about future processes as well. So a McKinsey report states that by 2030, data is going to be embedded in systems, processes, channels, interactions, and decision points that drive automated actions with sufficient human oversight. So just keeping in mind these future processes, which is really difficult because we don't know what's in the future. And so you've got to make some decisions now, but also trying to in some way future-proof, at least for the short term, with an eye to like, how are your systems going to evolve longer term, and having that regular reflection on your data strategy going forward. So it might be a 3-year or 2-year or 5-year sort of reflection on your data strategy. So a key data process that will be discussed in a later webinar, which is so important, is data governance. And this is the practice of keeping good data. This is about data ownership, data access, data sovereignty, data security, data quality, and knowledge. And so this is so important around like just making sure that your data is kept in a safe, secure environment, ethically, and attributing the right sort of sovereignty and data quality to those data. So a really important issue, and there's a lot of work in the data governance space. One of the sites is for managing other people's information and data, a guide for charities and businesses. So just reminding people of the actual obligations, legal obligations with respect to managing data. And there'll be as I said, a webinar around this as well. But it is important to understand the legal requirements about this. And importantly, the ACNC says the important thing is to develop a policy for how you're going to actually collect, store, and use those data. So that brings us then to the products. And so one of the big questions that is asked by organisations is, you know, what sort of products do I need in my data to use my data, manage my data, analyse, and communicate about my data. So thinking about the relevance, the accessibility, and the performance of technology for your people and your business. So thinking about like these products, how relevant, how accessible will they be, how useful will they be? The product needs for every business stage, so mapping out that data lifecycle and then thinking about the products that are required for that, using established methodologies and proven tech combinations. Sometimes these can be more expensive, but they then are more proven, if you like, seeing what other people use and then like your peers, and then choosing on the basis of that and talking through the network about what sorts of methods and tech combinations are useful. Planning for the future, as we've talked about, and finding these peer organisations. So at a level 1, you might think about, okay, I'm a very small organisation and I'm going to use Excel. You could think about moving to an SQL system where you have more security around your data and better data management. And potential for higher data quality, or at least when you're using Excel to really structure the spreadsheets so that you have good metadata and good control over the inputs and the outputs of those spreadsheets. Moving to data analysis, many organisations use Excel again, thinking about moving to something like Power BI or some of the other analogues in the space there, just moving the analysis along a little bit. And data reporting can be, for example, in Word, and all of this can be on a laptop or a single computer. That's level 1. There's different levels, and you might go to level 5, where now you're thinking about a whole range of different sources of data. So flat files through to unstructured text data to streaming data. You then need to have a good way of storing, ingesting that information and storing that information. You need to think about how you're going to integrate and transform that information, having a data warehouse, and then having some sort of, predictive analytics and visualizations that's going with that, and then how you're going to present that through dashboards, reports, and so on. And so that whole sort of data strategy and data products for each of those levels. So ATSIX, for example, for its products is using a data lakehouse and scoping for a client central CRM. Their overarching aims then are to address the end user needs operating at different timescales, the interoperability between each component, and rolling out over different timeframes. And so their current practice then, as you can see here, is thinking about data acquisition in multiple formats, Microsoft and SQL Server, and migrating to cloud computing. And then they're thinking about dashboards, what dashboards could look like. This is for ABC, for the third case study, I'm sorry. So a comparison with another organisation, Cancer Council Queensland, for example, uses CSV files for data provision. It uses data and R analytics packages for its data storage and analysis. It has Azure databases, and it reports in Power BI, Stata, and R. I thought it was just useful to show some of these product stacks or tech stacks that organisations are using. So putting it all together then is really about thinking about the purpose, the parameters, the people, the products, and the processes. And just very quickly then, a data strategy roadmap is going to almost the implementation strategy for that data strategy. So how are you going to set up the implementation of that strategy? So you can think about prioritizing the different activities according to the feasibility and the impact, and deciding on how you might start your activities on the basis of that. So high feasibility, high impact activities will have higher priority. You also need to think about, importantly, change management. So one of the most important keys to a successful data strategy is the change management process. And so you need to have good leadership and buy-in, good training, good budget support, communication, evaluation, and this updating opportunity for your strategy. There's some examples in this that I've provided, and I'll leave that for you to consider if you wish to access the slides or see the recording of this and pause on these. So I'm just going to skip through that. There's the text versions of a roadmap. There's also ATSIX roadmap, which is sort of like a visual interpretation of or depiction of the roadmap as well. So different ways that you might structure a roadmap. And so again, I'll just flick through these, reminding about the structure of the report at the end to sort of bring all of these aspects together. So this was the APS report. Again, what are the elements of the strategy? So all of that, the considerations that we've talked about are sort of summarised in this kind of report, in these elements, and for the ATSIX report through these elements. So I'm hoping that this is useful for you to see as a way of structuring a data strategy and also the elements of that data strategy. And the final step then is evaluation and adaptation. And Winston Churchill says, however beautiful the strategy is, you should occasionally look at the results. So again, like making sure that your strategy and the implementation is evaluated and is updated as needed. Just as finally, if you wish to talk to me about any of this, you're very welcome. I'm part of the Centre for Data Science at QUT and also the Australian Data Science Network. And so we can reach out to a large number of people in data science from different disciplines who would be very happy to talk to you some more. Thank you. I'll leave it at that, Amy.
Thank you so much, Kerrie. I've just put in the chat. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. I'll just share a couple of last slides that we have before we move into a couple of minutes for Q&A. So yeah, I just wanted to say for everyone, you can reach out to our team if you have any questions about the DFSV Data Insights Network, and our contact details are also DFSV Data Insights at qcos.org.au. And I just wanted to say a big thank you to Kerrie for being so generous with your time today and sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. And yeah, we really do appreciate your enthusiasm to share with the network, and just wanted to express our gratitude for you sharing all of these insights today. I had some key takeaways that I thought I'd share with the recording. So I just thought it was really important for DFSV services. Today was really just that reminder about starting to think about data strategy and understanding what a data strategy is, and how data is used within your organisation, and then again thinking about and understanding the value of data and how it links to your organisation's vision and purpose, which is really important, and to understand what people, processes and systems could be in place to support you in developing a data strategy. And obviously, like every organization's data strategy will look really different. So we just thought we'd give some prompts around some really good examples as well that Kerrie shared about what it might look like across different organizations, whether they're small or medium or larger organizations or rural, remote or city. And so really the value of a data strategy for DFSV services is it's something that organizations can have ownership over. It can be a document or tool to speak within and across teams about your data priorities and your data vision. And it will really support your data capability at an organizational level, because we did hear organizations really want some support around developing a data culture and building a data-driven culture within their organizations. And it's to support organizations to build and develop deeper conversations about data-driven decisions, data strategy and priorities. So yeah, again, thank you, Kerrie. I'll start to stop the recording, and we might stay online because I know we started 5 minutes early, late, sorry. So I'll stop recording and we can take a couple of questions when I work out how to stop the recording.